Welcome back to the Siren Podcast, I'm co-founder of Indivisible, and I'd like to call you my friend, if that's okay, because it makes me feel really cool, Ezra Levin. Um, we actually were just saying that in the aftermath of of a lot of things, right? It's been a roller coaster. We had the No Kings protests, which were like on top of the mountain,
Oh
like
my god.
the greatest, most triumphant, most exciting community building, fiery, empowering beauty to this historic election on the Tuesday of 2 Tuesdays ago. Oh my God, it feels like a million years ago. One of the most historic elections for Democrats in more than a decade, in some cases in a century, in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where they have a new district attorney. Um, and then and then we had the continuing resolution cave deal. I don't know what language you want to use, but you were saying just now as you came on that you have your position on this has changed some from angry, righteous anger, which deserved anger, to a place now of almost hopefulness and a clarification. And I want to jump in right there,
Yeah.
actually.
Look, I think if you were paying close attention to this, you got really angry a couple Sundays ago because, as you said it, Joe, we had the largest peaceful protest in American history with No Kings 2. We had the best election outcome a couple Tuesdays ago than I've seen in a decade plus. We trounced the regime in Mississippi and Georgia, in New Jersey and Virginia and New York City and in California. Everywhere the regime was on the ballot, we were just winning. We were wiping the floor with them. And the public approvals for the Democrats were going up because they were fighting back. The approval ratings for the Republicans were in the toilet. They were going down. Trump himself, after the election results, came out and said, gosh, this shutdown's really hurting us. We better figure out a way out of this. So we were winning the fight. And almost for the first time in a year, it felt like we had this unified opposition party that we had been trying to build for the full year since the last election, since Trump got reelected. And finally, it kind of felt like we were there. They were fighting back and they were winning and they were getting public approval for winning. And then it all fell apart because the Senate Democrats didn't. I don't call it a deal, Joe. I really don't, because a deal implies you got something, right? A
Yeah.
deal implies, like, politics is all about the art of the possible. Politics is, you ask for the full loaf, you get half a loaf. Maybe you get a third of a loaf. Maybe you get a quarter of a loaf, but you get something. That's the deal.
Mhm.
We got nothing. We got jack shit, Joe. That's what we got.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself would be bad. That in the context of where he was, where we were in that moment, was so dispiriting because what it showed was the last year of our efforts, from the town halls in February and March to hands off in April to No Kings in June to No Kings 2 in October, while we were building up the force of people power to push the Dems into fighting posture, dim leadership was either unable or incapable of leading that unified opposition. And so in the immediate aftermath of that, I was very angry. and and I will say where I've gotten now is in this place of almost it's resolve and it's cautious optimism. And it's because it was so bad, Joe. It's because the surrender was so complete, because we got nothing, that when I talk to people around the country, folks who are not like lefty activist type Democrats who are always trying to push the party, but normal everyday Democrats who thought, hey, maybe the Democrats found some backbone. Like, this is cool. They're fighting back. Maybe they're finally rising to the occasion. They are so let down that it gives me optimism that we're heading into a primary season where we might actually be able to demand more. There is a chasm between normal rank and file Democrats and Democratic leadership that is so vast that the only place for it to go next is for us to demand new leaders. And I gotta say, I am sick of being disappointed by the existing Democratic leadership. I'm sick of like pointing the finger and saying they're not leading us, they're failing us, we've got to push them. It's like, okay, they're not listening. So at this point, it comes down to us. Are we going to do the work that's necessary to demand better and then rally around those leaders to stop the regime that is, invading our cities, that is zip tying children and dragging them out of apartment buildings in Chicago, that is threatening to steal the midterm election? Are we going to elect a Democratic Party in the primaries coming up that fights back, or aren't we? And that's not on Chuck Schumer. That's not on some failed Democratic leader who we're disappointed with, whoever it may be. That's on us ultimately. And I actually think that people are with us. And so that's why I was, yeah, incandescent rage, I think is a phrase that I used a few times. I was very angry afterwards. And now it's like, you know what? It's clarifying. It is clarifying where we are and what this requires of us. And the good news is the opportunity is right in front of us to take.
But see, that's what makes Indivisible so special. That's what makes what you do so unique and so powerful, and so effective. Is that, and I get it. I was right there with you. Believe me, I was just every fucking F bomb on the planet. Are you fucking kidding me? I was getting texts from my friends who, like you said, were texting me saying, "Wow, the Democrats have a spine. This is awesome. This is the fight that this is what I want to see." And it went from that to, "Oh yeah, look, the Democrats cave like they always do. Blah 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 blah." And then what's the point, right? What's the
Yes.
point that I constantly
Yeah.
saw? Which is terrifying because that apathy is the enemy of democracy. And that's again, we have to give ourselves a grace for being there, right? Like in the wake of 2016, it was all the things, but there was that rage that still exists in many ways, right? That righteous indignation. But what you do, what Indivisible does, what is so important is that you don't reside there. You take that, which is just understandable, right? We are human beings, and we were on this what felt like for the first time in forever a momentum swing. I kept calling it the pendulum swinging back because the people came out in my state here in New Jersey. So many people flipped back. It was like, okay, we're here. So then when you in the middle of being there, you get punched in the gut the way that we were, you're going to feel the things you're going to feel, but you're allowed to be there for a moment. But if you reside there, then what you get is nothing, right? There's no positive movement. You have to channel that rage, that anger, that frustration into action. And that's exactly what you're doing. And you're telling the very same people who did show up in historic numbers on 2 Tuesdays ago, oh, no, no, you're not done yet. You're right. You're right to be upset. You're right to be disappointed. You're right to be disillusioned. But what you cannot do is disengage because we're giving you actions, places to put this righteous indignation, this anger into change, the changes that you seek. And if you're not happy, you don't have to accept it. And that's been so empowering about what you've always done. And that's how you've built this incredible movement that was responsible in many ways for all of these protests and for keeping people like me from despair. And so let's talk about that, right? So what are these steps that you're talking about? You have Indivisible announced its 2026 primary program last week. So talk about this program. How is it different from other programs Indivisible has launched in the past?
Yeah. So you said it exactly right that look, our enemy isn't the Trump regime. Our enemy isn't the Republican Party. It's not weak-kneed Democrats. All of those, they're opposition. We talked about this before. They're the opposition. Cynicism is our enemy. This sense of fatalism is our enemy because that's how the fascists win. They convince us that nothing we do matters. That's how the status quo of the Democratic Party wins. They make us believe like the Democratic Party's failed us, never going to succeed, never going to fight back, give up, don't pay attention to politics. But what we've seen time and time again is actually it is possible to rally around Democratic leaders to build the kind of coalition we need to fight back. And we have a lot of brilliant leaders in the Senate and the House. It's not all Democrats who are the problem. We've got people like Chris Murphy and Chris Van Hollen and Jasmine Crockett and Maxwell Pross and Jamie Raskin and AOC and Bernie Sanders. Like we can all list our favorites. They're in Congress. They're fighting the good fight. The question is, do they have the numbers to win the fight? And currently, we got to look at square in the face. They don't, Joe. We saw it last week. They do not have the numbers. There are a lot of Democrats who are going to line up behind Chuck Schumer, or Chuck Schumer himself is going to be incapable of corralling the number of Democrats, and we're going to lose. And so now the question is, what do we do about it? And that is where I like to go. I think it's fine for us to have an immediate emotional response like I did, and I think many other folks did. But I'm
Yeah.
not in here to rage bait or just get people angry about this. Like, God, how depressing would that be? Like, why would you get involved in politics for that reason? We're here because we want to make change. We want to actually change what happens. I don't want this regime running roughshod over the country. And so I'm looking at how do we build the power necessary to push back as a unified force. And I thought for the last year we could do that through convincing Democratic Party leadership to get on board. And I thought we were making progress. And I think we made progress here and there. But what we discovered a couple weekends ago was the time for trying to convince them is over. We either demand the party through the primaries or we don't, and we'll get the continued leadership we've got. So that gets into why we launched the primary program right after that surrender. And we don't know the full contours of this program yet. I'm not the leader of Indivisible. As you know, this is being led by indivisible groups all over the country. So what I can commit to is we're working with indivisible in New Jersey and in Michigan and in Maine and in Texas and in North Carolina and Georgia, all over to ask them, okay, where are you excited to dig in? Who are the candidates you're jazzed about? Who do you think is more in the fighter mold than the fold mode? Let's work together to elect those leaders. That's what we can do. And as one starting place, one place where we know is a baseline requirement for any Democratic senator who's going to win indivisible support is you've got to be calling for new leadership. We cannot have the least popular political figure in the country leading us into the midterms and then governing after we take the Senate. That's not going to work. And so if you've got a Democratic senator up for reelection, look, y'all got it in New Jersey. Booker's running for reelection. If you've got a Democratic senator aspirant running in a place like Michigan or in Maine or in Minnesota, a baseline question is, well, do you support Chuck Schumer for leadership? That's something they should be able to tell you. It's not everything you need to know about a candidate, but if you've got somebody who says, yeah, the guy with a 17% approval rating who repeatedly folds or fails to crowd the caucus, that's my guy, that's a strong signal that maybe you should be looking at somebody else to lead the Democratic Party. And that's an opportunity right in front of us right now. And I think if we take it, it's not just going to change what happens a year from now. It's going to change where the party is in real time because they're going to see these primaries and start saying to themselves, oh shit, the people are pissed at us. We've got to call for new leadership. We've got to adjust our strategy. And that's going to affect things in the immediate term, in addition to once we hopefully retake the Senate and the House in 2027.
Which is a fix for so many things, because something I've heard, I'm sure you've heard for a very long time, is that I don't feel reflected by these people. I don't feel seen by these people. I don't feel represented by these people. Like Chuck Schumer, a lot of people have said, yeah, I can't relate to this guy. He doesn't relate to me. He doesn't care about me. And then this happens. And whether or not it was Chuck Schumer who's trying to cover whatever he did with his no vote, or whether it's just that it was a failure of leadership, I mean, we could debate that all day long, right? Putting up these very safe senators to make them the sacrificial lambs. We can, again, do the autopsy on that all day long. But when you give people an opportunity to shape the candidates that do start reflecting them, they engage more because they do feel seen.
Yes.
So it's like it's medicine for so many things. And one of the things that resonates so strongly with me about what you do is, personally in my life, that whenever I've been like reduced to rubble, down to the studs, you have an opportunity there. It's a really fucked up way to see things in many ways, because you're like, oh shit, so bad that I'm completely wiped out. But you have an opportunity to rebuild something that's closer to what you actually want. You can rebuild stronger. You don't make some of the mistakes you've made in the past. You don't take some of the same choices, the safe choices you've made in the past. You do things differently, smarter, more reflective of what you actually want. And it's trying to see a glass is half full in a very half empty world out there right now. But like, this is that opportunity, because we've long needed this kind of conversation, this difficult introspective conversation in our party, because it seems like there are two factions. There's this establishment faction that has control and doesn't want to let go of it, that doesn't want to evolve, when the Republicans have evolved into a cult of personality. And there's this faction of Democrats, like you said, you named so many: Chris Murphy, Jasmine Crockett, Jamie Raskin, et cetera. The list goes on. And they're the ones, Andy Kim, who's one of my senators as
Love it.
well,
Love them.
right? There's this faction that's saying we can't continue the status quo. We need to change. We've lost touch with our voters. Something else I heard, last thing I will say, from a lot of my friends, again, was your party, our party, in some cases yours, because I have friends who are independents, has lost touch with the American people. They are so out of march lockstep. They do not understand who the voters are in this country anymore. And when you look at New York City, that was a different race, where that is a candidate who understood who he was running for. And
Yeah.
not that I think that he would necessarily have been the New Jersey governor. I don't think Mikey Sherrill would have won for mayor in New York. But this opportunity that we have right now to do everything you're saying, I think it's sustaining for the long term, which is how we should be thinking.
I I so agree with that. I'm actually getting chills just hearing you talk about it because I think a lot of our conversation these days is about we've got a fascist regime that is terrorizing our communities and states, that is threatening our elections. And we got to stop that. We got to build this big tent of no. And that big tent of no has to include everybody from Imam Dani in New York City to Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, or Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, or folks in Georgia and Mississippi. And those folks are going to look different. They're going to have different ideas for what the future looks like. But we're not just building a big tent of no. We're also electing, for instance, this cycle, senators who will serve past Trump. They're going to be in office after Trump leaves. They're going to be in office in 2029 when, God willing, we have a Democratic trifecta. And are those senators going to be the ones that say, well, D.C. statehood, I don't think we should be moving forward that. Eliminating the filibuster to protect voting rights? Nah, we shouldn't be doing that. Like, that's
Right.
what's on the table literally this year. This year coming up, that is what's on the table. So I really do hope people view this as this big opportunity in front of us right now, that if you are in especially a safe blue state, you know you're going to have a Democratic senator or a Democratic representative in your safe district. Whoever wins the primary is going to win. There's no conflict between electing a fighter here and defeating the Republicans in the midterms. You actually get to choose who is the representative of the party where you are. My God, what an opportunity to help build our democracy, especially in a New Jersey, in a Colorado, in a Virginia, in a Rhode Island, in these safe states that are coming up. There should be challenges. There should be healthy primary discussions about what is the future of the party. And the way we get there, though, here's why we are focused on Schumer for this. It's not, I don't have an axe to grind against the guy. He's a nice guy. He has a rough caucus to deal with, and he's mostly reflecting that caucus. The reason why we're focusing on Schumer right now is it is a clear dividing line between status quo politics and the politics of the future. If you are a Democratic senator candidate this year and you cannot say, no, we need new leadership, I'm sorry. What are we doing here? What party are we talking about here? Like, you're not going to win an extra vote in Texas or North Carolina or Maine or Minnesota or Michigan by backing up Chuck Schumer. The Democratic Party right now has an approval rating that is lower than the Republican Party. Can you imagine that, Joe? Given everything Trump is doing, everything Republicans are doing, and our brand, the Democratic Party brand, is in the toilet. We need to rehabilitate it. There's not much better that you can do to rehabilitate it than electing a whole slate of new leaders who aren't part of the failed former party, but are representing a fighting future that people can believe in. And I do think Mamdani did that brilliantly, winning young men by 40 points, driving turnout through the roof. I think it's a time where we should be demanding more. And that is why I end in a place of optimism, because I don't think Schumer's going to bring this change. I don't think the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee is going to bring this change. But when I talk to people around the country, just like you're talking to folks who are, maybe they're independent or they're not hardcore politicos, they want something better. You know, they want to get on board with this. And so then it's an organizing challenge. Whoa, the light really hit me there.
It was godlike.
Yeah, but it's just an organizing challenge at that point. We got a lot of folks who actually agree with us that the current version of the party ain't working out. And so then we just got to figure out, how do we bring them into the fold to make them believe that they can be part of something special, that this is a historic moment for the party, not just against Trump, but for building a party that doesn't disappoint us.
Right, and again, back to some of my friends' texts and my own feelings, it felt like those 8 senators on the heels, the timing was just, like, it was insane. It felt as though those 8 senators just didn't listen. They weren't understanding the takeaways from that historic election that Tuesday night, and I think that was a lot of salt in the wounds there. But I'm curious because obviously there were so many indicators, like you said, in New York City. Here in New Jersey, we bucked, the way things go here with another Democratic governor for a 3rd term. That hasn't happened here in decades either. We also saw people switching, like I said, people flipping back. We saw MAGA. We saw Trump voters voting for Democrats, holding their noses and voting for Democrats. So I'm curious, those 8 senators might not have been listening to what the American people were saying, but what are your takeaways from that night? What, to your point again, about being able to reach other folks, being able to bring more people into the tent, more people into the fold. What does that election 2 Tuesdays ago, what does that indicate for where the American people are and how we can reach them, and what kinds of candidates we should be looking for, they should be looking for, we should be encouraging to run?
Yeah. So a couple things. Well, one, you mentioned this earlier, that there were these 8 senators, and how convenient that They're all either retiring or not up for reelection next year. I can tell you, they said that was orchestrated. There were many other senators who are up for reelection next year who knew there would be blowback, but the caucus as a whole, or some sizable portion of the caucus, the Democratic caucus in the Senate, said, okay, we're going to surrender. Who's going to take the heat? Not
Yeah.
gonna be me, I'm up for reelection, I don't wanna take the so they assigned it, and that's how it was put together, which is why I think those 8 deserve blowback that they're getting, but don't be distracted just by those 8. I would put
Mhm.
a lot of attention on the Democratic senators up in safe seats this year coming up, so that includes great progressive leaders like a Merkley in Oregon or a Markey in Massachusetts or a Booker in New Jersey or a Warner in Virginia or a
Or an
Hickenlooper in
awesome.
Colorado, or Jack Reed in Rhode Island, or Chris Coons in Delaware. These are all safe state senators who are up for reelection who could be calling for new leadership, but they're not yet. We should be
Mhm.
demanding that they do, and we should be demanding new leaders if they won't do that. And when I talk to folks around the country, what I'm seeing is just incredible demand for somebody to give them something to believe in. That's what they want to see. And that election two Tuesdays ago, we saw a pretty fair amount of ideological diversity, which I think is really healthy for the Democratic Party because the kind of candidate who's going to win in New York City is going to be different than the kind of candidate that's going to win in Mississippi, than the kind of candidates that's going to win in Virginia, even than the kind of candidate that's going to live over state lines in New Jersey. That's okay. But the through line I saw, there were two parts of the through line I saw. One was every one of them, every election was about, are you pushing back against this fascist regime or aren't you? Like, we are going to fight back against Trump. We're not going to allow him to invade New York City. We're not going to allow him to bully our universities in Virginia. We are not going to allow him to rig the elections in California. We saw overwhelmingly, we're going to fight back against. That's step one. So that's fight, not fold. But the other thing was this affordability line. And that worked in New York
Mhm.
City. That worked in New Jersey. That worked in Virginia. It worked all over. And these two things aren't unrelated because Trump campaigned on lowering your cost of bread and eggs and making your life better. That's how he won. And instead, he's implementing Project 2025 and the least popular policy agenda in modern American history while he builds himself a golden ballroom and your prices continue to go up. So the fact that this is a authoritarian regime that is engaged in self-enrichment and is totally ignoring your needs, those two arguments go hand in glove, and it allows for some amount of ideological diversity. You can build a big tent out of that, but it means that the definition of the Democratic Party cannot be, and now we're going to reach out to Trump and cut some deals. Like, that can't be it. That can't be it. And it can't be, we're going to cave when he causes harm because then he's going to do more harm. So I, I, this is what I am bringing to with me into the primary fight and in my conversations with other indivisible groups. There's not some litmus test that you've got to have X healthcare policy or X position on economics or X position on education. Like, we've got to allow for a lot of diversity there, but we can't allow cowards in the Democratic Party. You don't get votes by being a coward. You don't get votes by promising to fold. That's just not a path forward. I think we should be talking about how we're going to improve people's lives and pointing out that Trump is doing anything but.
Right, and I mean, Timothy Snyder, it's rule number 1, you don't obey in advance, you don't capitulate. We've
The
learned with Donald Trump from every university that has done so, that when you do that with an authoritarian, when you do that with a bully, they just come back for more. That's what that's what these Democrats have made open the door for. And the last question I would ask is because of that, this idea that we were talking about, about apathy and cynicism, and the fear that people will slip into this, just the reality that they don't have a voice, they don't have a say. What is the status of the resistance right now? What's the temperature on how people are feeling, and are they feeling like I said, like, are they feeling downtrodden and as if this is hopeless and what just happened in this capitulation is proof that it doesn't matter what they do, or do you see the opposite, which is where you and I have come to as an evolution of this whole debacle, which is now I'm more fired up than ever.
So I have the pleasure of working with, I think, the salt of the earth political organizers around the country, these indivisible group leaders who are in just about every congressional district in the country, and we're a practical bunch. Joe. We are not ones to wallow. The definition of the indivisible group leader is somebody who picked themselves up off the floor either after the 2016 election or after the 2024 election, said, "Well, shit, I guess I've got to do something about it." And now they're organizing. And so I think people were pissed off right afterwards at Schumer and at the 8 who folded. And then I think they asked the key question I hope everybody asks, which is, okay, what are we going to do about it? And that's where I see fire now. And the obvious place that you go next is primaries, but it's not the only place you go. A local representative, U.S. representative in your state, in New Jersey, is currently being threatened by the Trump regime. This is McIver, represents over north in the state, and the regime is attacking her because she had the gall to try to investigate abuses at an ICE detention facility. And so they're coming at her, and her legal bills are mounting. We sent an email this past weekend trying to raise money for her legal fees. Indivisible members across the country donated nearly $100,000 in a 24-hour
Oh,
period to help pay for her legal
damn.
fees. On another front, in Tennessee, we've got a special election in a pretty Trump district, but one that we might be able to win if everything goes our way. Afton Bain, a former Indivisible organizer, is running against a Republican there. And she's going to be joining us for our What's the Plan call on Thursday. People are jazzed up at the possibility about being elect people not just in deep blue country, not being able to just take out bad Democrats, but run in rural areas, run in Trump areas, run in red areas. And they are showing up at phone banks and showing up at GOTV efforts in the district at numbers I haven't seen before. So look, I think it is right for us to be angry and disappointed in the leadership. And I am encouraged by people who take that anger and that disappointment and they're funneling into actual productive on the ground work because that's all we can do. The alternative is giving up. And as long as these guys are in the White House, as long as they're implementing Project 2025, as long as they're trying to consolidate control, I ain't giving up. I'm going to demand the party we need, and I'm going to rally around whatever party wins the primary, and then we're going to stop these fascists in the midterms, protect the results, and start holding them accountable in January of 2027 when we have the House and the Senate.
Well, that is medicine, 100%. That is exactly the kind of energy that I think that we need to infuse into our party, into our country every single day. I appreciate you, as I've told you many times, and I am also not going to stop fighting anytime soon. And anything you need, anything Indivisible needs, you know that you have an ally in me and the Siren Network and in all of my friends out there. Thank you for doing all this work and for getting into good trouble all the time, and also for keeping us hopeful and engaged because that really is what we need more than anything right now. So thank you so much, Ezra.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you to the Siren. We need independent media out there that's actually informing people about what's going on. And I will say, my goal is not to come here and say everything's sunshine and rainbows or to tell everybody to have hope. My goal is to tell you, you got power. That where we are right now is not where we're going to end up. And the way we're going to end up where we're going is by all of us doing the work, building that power and applying it. I think that's in our future. I think within our reach. We just got to do the work.
Yeah, and we're gonna do it. So thank you so much, Ezra. I really appreciate you as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good deal.